Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today when we talk about AI and contracts and procurement. Really happy to have everyone on this call today, and I would like to welcome our two featured speakers here, Greg Tennyson and Steve Sopko, two of the leading experts in the areas of contracts and procurement. And now that we're getting into AI, I'd love to get their perspective on how this new technology is changing the world that we live in, and at least our little world. So, my name is Craig Guarente. I'm the CEO and founder of Palisade Compliance. And as I mentioned, I've got two special guests with us today, and perhaps you guys can introduce yourselves. Greg, welcome to the show.
Craig, good to see you again, old friend. Craig and I were at Oracle together. My background, real quick: procurement for the bulk of my career, Chief Procurement Officer, Oracle, Salesforce, and Vision Service Plan, VSP. Actually had a run at a tech startup within the procure tech space. So it really has allowed me to hopefully develop an informed opinion on how AI is being leveraged within the procurement space. Looking forward to the conversation, Craig and Steve.
And we won't comment on that sweatshirt, other than to say it's on you. Thanks for joining us, Greg. And Steve, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks. So my background, I started out as a federal contracting officer on the procurement side years ago, mainly research and development, and then went to what many consider to be the dark side, sales contracting. And that's where I've been for the last 20 odd years. So I was at Dell for a number of years and then started a couple of legal process outsourcing companies, one of which is one of the biggest in the industry today. And then came to work with you, Greg, at Oracle, responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa, contracts, business practices. And so looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Now, thanks, Steve. And I love the fact that you guys, your experiences are really, same industries, contracting, but one's on sales and one's on procurement. So opposite ends of the spectrum, as they say. And, for full disclosure here, this world of AI is changing so rapidly that Steve and Greg and I actually we tried to record a version of this webinar about a month ago. We all got in a room like this, and we hit the record button, and that was back in November. And as time went by, like the world was changing, different things happened in AI, which made our recording from a month ago almost irrelevant. Like, hey, that would be crazy to say that in the middle of December, which was totally relevant in the beginning of November. So we scrapped that recording. We will save that one for the archives one day. And we decided to do this again because things are changing so fast. So thanks, guys, for not only doing this webinar, but doing it twice. I really do appreciate that. One of the things before we get into it, I just wanted to sort of set the baseline when we talk about AI, because AI has been around in various versions for a while. And I think the thing that really changed this year or last year was when Microsoft and ChatGPT came out. And then it was generative AI, where you could look at artificial intelligence to actually create material for you, create PowerPoint presentations, create speeches, create copy editing, create contracts, create negotiation positions, things like that. And I think that's been the big change. And that's sort of what we're all trying to get accustomed to. So, Greg, you have mentioned that you took a run at an AI startup or at a contracting technology startup. So, what are people saying about AI in procurement? How is that already impacting the field or the industry? And I've got some specific examples of things that have been in the news. But before we get into specifics, I thought, just what do you see as the big trends that are coming when it comes to AI and what we all do for a living?
Yeah, it's interesting. There is so many applications for AI within the procurement space. There's technologies like Zip, as an example, that is using AI to ingest intake opportunity from the business and do it in a conversational way rather than the if-then conditional statements that have been used in the past or web forms. So the interaction with the business has advanced where it's more conversational. One company, the company I worked at for 2 years, Fair Market, You think of the autonomous driving vehicle where you get behind the wheel and the vehicle takes over and drives. They're using AI to automate running sourcing events. So they intercept purchase demand within your P2P system, understand what the business wants to buy, make sense of it. Then they match the right qualified suppliers to the opportunity, run the sourcing event, do the bid comparison.
Wow.
Using decision criteria, make an award decision for you. They can automate running sourcing events absent, anyone touching it. In your space, I'm aware of a company, Terzo, that is using OCR and AI to extract contract data elements from a series of contracts. So you think about the poor attorney during due diligence, discovery, M&A activities, that's in the clean room looking at X number of contracts and having to review those to ferret out what's relevant. Now AI is doing that for them and serving up results. So there's a number of applications for AI within the procurement space. What I love about it, it's taking the mundane tactical work, automating it, elevating the individual to be more strategic in how they provide services to their business, as well as interact with the suppliers. So it's really helping procurement become more of a trusted advisor to the business, because they no longer have to do the heavy lift of running a sourcing event, doing an analysis, or reviewing contracts. So the upside's huge.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's in, the way you phrase that is it brings me back to my Oracle days before we were thinking about AI, and we were thinking about taking tactical tasks and moving them offshore so that people who remained in country, let's say, could do more strategic work. I mean, Steve, how do you see AI impacting the sell side of contracting?
Sure. So I think you raise a good point. It kind of started with contract lifecycle management software, and then the whole outsourcing or offshoring movement, whether it was to India or the Philippines or Texas. You find where the people are and you send the work there. That's great. The challenge with all that has always been you have to make all the decisions in advance. You have to anticipate, okay, 80% of the time this issue comes up. The remaining 20%, there are 15 or 20 different issues. So it was very difficult to write the book in advance of what could happen and what the reaction should be. And I think that's one of the big steps forward here with AI is, you've got that mass of text, and there's an algorithm looking at that saying, are you aware that you usually do this? And I think that's going to be tremendously helpful. And then on the sales side, I always talk about it's the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers thing. What we're doing on the sales side is we're usually in the Ginger Rogers role where we're doing everything backwards in high heels. Enough about my hobbies. But I think that really, I think AI gives us the opportunity to be more responsive to customers. Because if you think about it, you have 100 customers, each of them has a different thing they want. And a lot of times in sales organizations, the leadership doesn't find out the things that are tripping up the negotiation until very late in the day. And a lot of times they're stunned. Why are we arguing about that? That's ridiculous. Agree to it, make the deal, let's get going. And so I think that AI is going to bring a lot of transparency to the sales side that just doesn't exist today. And I think that's going to be one of the fastest benefits to both sides, to both procurement and sales, where the people doing the selling kind of have a better understanding earlier on.
Right.
It's interesting. Do you mind if I jump in real quick, Craig?
Go do your thing.
So transparency, I see it going a little further, Steve, where now an executive sees both sides of the relationship, the sell side, buy side, with those same parties in play, balance of trade, quid pro quo, reciprocal trading, whatever you want to call it. But now they can get a holistic view of the relationship. What's tripping up on legal terms, commercial terms, what percent discount is one offered the other, and taking that up a level really to manage the holistic relationship, from a relationship management perspective.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this again and do it live is in between the first time we recorded this and today, there was a news article that came out that said For the first time ever, artificial intelligence actually negotiated a contract without human involvement. So they had one intelligence system here and one here. And Steve, this goes back to your point of it's a non-disclosure agreement. So literally, it went from connecting these two systems, opening up Microsoft Word, reviewing the document, suggesting alternatives, negotiating back and forth, agreeing to those terms, and uploading that document into DocuSign. So the only human, other than programming the systems, the only human interaction was signing the document, right? So I'm reading this article, and I remember watching a movie trailer once about this guy who liked to climb high rises and trapeze artist, and you're watching these stunning pictures and getting nervous, like, oh my God, I'm reading this article going, oh my God, I would never sign something that I didn't read before. Like I know they think they're gonna. How do we take that sort of like an old person like me who's like, no, I have to read that and I want to make sure everything is perfect, right? In theory, all of that took a lot of the tasks out. But I'm reading that going, well, what if it screws it up and then I'm going to jump in at the end? Like I'm reading this getting very nervous. I guess it's like the first time you get into a self-driving car. Like what am I doing here? We're all going to die. So even though it's a non-disclosure agreement, are we going to get past that? Or are we always going to have that sort of human worry about what this thing is doing? Or one day are we going to take it for granted?
Wow. I think, as with everything, one day we'll take it for granted, but that day may be very far in the future. It's like I used to say around some of the contract lifecycle management software claims. It's like it's the system of tomorrow, and it always will be. There won't ever be a point where we have enough trust in it to give it truly critical things. You know, I have the same feeling about a self-driving car because it's life and death. An NDA is kind of where we always start with process improvement in contracts because while NDAs are important, they're also less variable than a lot of other parts of the relationship. So if you're going to take a chance on something, don't take a chance on something the business is counting on or that creates massive risk. You take a chance on something that's more of a system than a criticality, or it's a lower criticality system. So that's my thought. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a number of factors in play. One, it's generational. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson who knows how to get around my iPhone better than I do.
Right.
And he's 2.5 years old. He gets on that device and he starts flipping screens, going through, and he changes stuff that takes me an hour to fix because I don't know how to get back to what he changed. So it's generational. I think there's also another factor, probably most prevailing, is the economics of AI. You think about, what it will do for us, translations. I've got a list here in front of me from Gartner, facial recognition, driving in a car autonomously, medical scanning of diagnosis, even software programming. You think about what AI can do for us, and it will become an economics decision. And over time, AI will get better and better. Let's say it starts with directionally correct, maybe 80, 85% accurate. But the more data it consumes, those large language models, it's going to get more precise in the outcomes. And I know there's several of us, myself included, that have the Skynet fear that it will take over, Earth.
Yep.
But I think it's inevitable.
You're not the only one with the Skynet fears.
Absolutely.
We're sort of all there. Yeah, I thought just the idea of two systems talking to each other and then putting it into DocuSign and sending me an email saying, hey, you can sign this now, Greg. It's okay. It's like,
Yeah.
1 second.
There's a lot of science fiction from back in the 90s. I think William Gibson wrote about it, where different AIs would talk to each other, and humans were completely absent from the model. And as in so many other things, he saw it coming. Now he wasn't writing a happy story about it, so hopefully we can improve on what he thought was going to happen. So.
Yeah.
And we do there's a couple other things I wanted to make sure that we discuss, but if anybody on the call wants to ask a question, you can always put it in the chat and we will get to it during this session. I don't think I said that at the beginning. So that's there. So again, a lot has happened in the last, let's talk about some disruption and maybe how AI is not being used in the best way. Um, Recently, the CEO of Sports Illustrated was fired because they were using AI generated content and AI generated visuals in some of their articles without attributing that. So I think we're going to start seeing that. That's one example of let's say AI gone bad. The opposite of negotiating. And it's going to be harder and harder to spot these things in the future. News disruption and create a video of this person saying this thing. They're still spottable, but it's getting harder and harder to connect these things. But I guess like in the world of advertising and marketing, there has been a settlement of the labor dispute in Hollywood. That was one of the big issues, is that writers were very worried that um, AI was going to be used to write scripts and copy and things like that. So they negotiated a settlement where, the big bosses wouldn't use those technologies. So is that something we're going to be doing now? Is going to be, because on the one hand, I totally get it. That's your livelihood. Um, AI is actually pulling from stuff you've created in the past and other people. It doesn't just make it up on its own. It has to learn from what other people have created, and it's spitting out something that's new. So are we going to be doing that a lot, or are contracts professionals going to be, you know, going into positions and requiring that we don't use AI because it's like a job protection thing, or are we in this industry going to be embracing this technology? I mean, where do you see this going?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And admittedly, I use AI in my contract review process. I'll ask it to propose alternative language on LOL, indemnification, whatever the language is, just to get a different perspective. And then I'll bring it back into Word, do the compare contrast, and then propose language. So I use it as a tool. Do I view it as plagiarizing somebody's IP? It's a good question, because to your point, it does draw on knowledge that is readily available in the public domain. But again, I'm not taking it verbatim. I'm using it as a way to inform and educate the conversation. It is interesting. I think the education system has got in front of it, where they've developed tools to detect AI written content, and they're calling it plagiarism. So if somebody asks, ChatGPT to write a story on George Orwell, and they just copy and paste it into a term paper, there's tools now that can detect that. So I guess one ask that I would have: there's so much fake news out there now. Why not use AI to help understand what is fake news, to remove it, as opposed to furthering the conversation around fake news? So, I mean, there's a lot of use cases for AI, not just generating content. We talked earlier about the music example, and I know Marissa had a point of view on being an artist on AI, singing a song, creating a song, writing content, etc. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting, next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think the difference in contracts is none of our stuff that we've written in our careers is copywritten. It's all contract language, and so there's protection of intellectual property around the business relationship. And the contracts themselves are usually confidential; they can't be released, that sort of thing. But nobody really owns that language. And it was interesting. I'm dating myself here, but during the dot-com era, I wrote this paragraph for a fledgling company called eBase One that was doing really some of the initial sort of software as a service in the energy space. And I was very proud of the contracts language that I wrote for them. And so, the dot-com, everything collapsed. I ended up at Dell. And then like 7 or 8 years later, I'm working at another company, and I see my language in that contract, for totally different industry, totally different situation. But I recognized my own language, and sure enough, I found that the person, loved that language so much at eBase One that they brought it to this company and to this company, and it's 2 or 3 iterations down the road. So I think that as contracts people, as people who negotiate, I think there is an understanding that is very fungible. I mean, a lot of the principles are common, across industries, across professions. But I think I think we can have a good conversation about what's likely to happen to people in this profession, because I do have some thoughts around that I want to get into. But I think in this space, we've been putting content into the ether, into the internet for the last 20, 25 years. There's so much of it out there that it's been daunting for 20 years, just the amount of stuff that is out there. There's no way you could ever see even a significant percentage of it in your lifetime. I think the thing that's got people really scared is, sure, all art is derivative. Every bit of art relies on other bits of art that have been done. But in the past, that was done by humans sort of fusing things together as a synergistic effort. Whereas now it's just going to be this massive machine grinding through tons of art and saying, hey, have you thought about a Western set in space? Boom, Star Wars, you're done. Have you thought about this, that, and that? Boom, and it's just going to be so fast and so mechanical that people aren't going to be able to keep up. And I think that was, at least from my perspective, one of the things that the writers were really worried about. It's that mechanization of what they do. And it's funny because that goes all the way back to the 1850s and some of the concerns about the early days of the Industrial Revolution. It's just, that thing that I was doing at a certain pace is now going to be done faster than the eye can follow. And I think that's scary.
Yeah, I was going to mention the assembly line as well with industrialization. We're just recreating that situation, or if you will, dilemma for this generation.
Absolutely.
It's a good call out, Steve.
Thanks.
Yeah, when I think about sort of in our little space, Steve, dealing with customers who have Oracle problems, and I'm sort of thinking about how could AI be used to help a customer negotiating with Oracle. It's often the traps are not what's in the contract. The traps are not, or what's not in the contract, or what's on some policy page. Or so I'm wondering if there's a space here where companies will be using, what do I need to worry about in Oracle, 3 years after I sign my Oracle license contract, or something like that, that will help them spot problems before they are actually being experienced, right? So doing more than just, and Greg, I commend you, because I have not used AI in the contracts process like you have, like give me an alternative, do this, things like that. I'm not that I do much of that work, but the stuff that I do, it's still the same way I did it in 1998, maybe just more experienced at it. But open up Word and start typing away, or call people I know, hey, have you seen this before? But I'm wondering if we're going to use more holistically to help procurement organizations. And one of the things I'm looking at this article here, and it's saying, how AI can help procurement is, identifying new suppliers or markets, right? I hadn't thought about that. Like, oh, you should sell this thing over there, and here's why. It's just beyond the helping me save time. It could help me generate revenue or opportunities.
It is interesting. There are a number of spend analytics tools in the marketplace today that do predictive and even prescriptive pricing. So you think about culling all this information, and Steve touched on it, these large databases where all this data exists, but nobody's, if you will, synthesizing it, leveraging it in an impactful way. There are companies that are taking all this information, using AI and saying, lumber, future price point, 1 month out, 2 months out, 3 months, based on, harvesting of wood in Brazil and shipping costs, et cetera. But they're starting to predict future price points. So, I mean, it's interesting how people are using AI to get in front of it from an economic standpoint. And those use cases, because we're naturally inquisitive, creative, are only going to intensify, increase going forward. So from a procurement standpoint, I mean, you mentioned the supplier match. identifying qualified suppliers. Fair Market does that today in their autonomous sourcing engine. They can ingest what the business wants to buy and using a number of algorithms say, these are your best matches. This is who you bought from in the past, but from our ecosystem, this is who everyone else is buying from. Or from Thomas.net, identify other suppliers that have that capability. And it's short-circuiting a lot of the thought into running a sourcing event. So it's interesting where technology is taking us. Again, I like to think it's lifting us out of the mundane tactical work, allowing us to become more of a trusted advisor. Would love to get your perspective, Steve.
I think it's a good point. I think the flip side of that, from my perspective, is, and I think we've all done this when we're negotiating contracts. You can't plan for everything. A contract can't, anticipate all possible outcomes. But one of the things that we expect our contracts people to do, our procurement people, is use judgment in every situation. Hey, I know we have all of these policies. Which ones actually apply to this situation, this scenario? And that sort of matching of context to deal is a big part of what the humans in the system are really important about. And I think, Craig, you kind of touched on it earlier in a different way. It's not so much what you put in, it's what you leave out. Michael Dell used to say, deciding to do something is easy. Deciding not to do something is really, really hard. And there's a thing that I've always looked at in deals called the single issue advocate or single issue stakeholder in any deal making process, whether it's risk or insurance or environmental or HR, any of these organizations in a company that write policies that the sales group or the procurement group is going to have to enforce during their negotiations. Again, it gets back to the way it's always been done. No one person can keep up with all of those policies. Well, now there are going to be systems that, if your deal is being looked at from a environmental AI, well, that deal is not going to look good to that environmental AI, but it looks really, really good to the business that needs that material or that product. So I think there are going to be different AIs looking at various parts of this process. And I think there's going to be a robust business for humans in this model saying, okay, A, how do we get this deal through? And B, what do we need to change about our rules? Because our rules don't really agree with each other. And I always think about HAL 9000 in 2001: A Space Odyssey. The reason that computer went nuts was because it had too many conflicting orders in its programming. And I think you're going to see that in the deal making process. I think before you see anything else, as AI starts to come in, all of those rules we've written over the last 10, 15, 20 years in our big organizations, they're all going to start to be enforced simultaneously. And I think a lot of us aren't ready for that.
And I think about, we want new technologies and things like AI to make things easier, right? I go back to our little world of Oracle. People thought, oh, when everything's in the cloud, your job is going to go away, and Oracle licensing is going to be so easy, and it's even more complex now. So we have my big AI project, guys, in December has been our family Christmas card. So I was like, I am going to generate a family Christmas card using nothing but AI. And normally you would take kid's a little older, so nobody wants to see him on the Christmas card anymore. So you take a picture of the dog and you put the dog on the Christmas card and you do a little Photoshop and you're done. It took me about an hour. Well, now I'm reading these. How do you create a Christmas card using AI? And there's actually one guy had 3 different AI engines you needed to use. So that's the path I took. I'm like, this is going to take me a lot longer. I mean, the image is going to be amazing. My dog leading the sled of Santa Claus over the North Pole. It's going to be beautiful. It'll be one of a kind. But was it really worth it? I mean, I've going to put a lot of effort into, and I guess just the idea of, okay, I did it. So I'm wondering, how much of this is going to make our lives easier in procurement or sales contracts, or it's just going to add more stuff that we need to know. Like, is it just going to make it that much harder? Like the cloud made licensing so much harder because now you've got multiple things to think about. Is this just going to bring in so much more data and information that I would imagine at first we're going to want to see everything, and then eventually we're going to say, okay, cut back on that, and we'll just focus over here. And I don't know how that's going to go.
Well, I
I
think go ahead, Greg.
go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay. I think we're in the hype cycle right now where all of the people, outside our profession who wonder, how is it possible that negotiating is so hard? How is it possible that procurement is so hard? How is it possible that sales operations is so hard? They see this as a golden opportunity and a shortcut. And as we all know, shortcuts almost never work. So they want to kind of hand it to AI, and AI will just quote unquote do it. And I think that's that is going to be the biggest challenge. It gets back to communicating the value we all add to our business processes. And I think that if we can be seen as leaders using AI in a way that will benefit the business, hey, good news, I synthesized what that customer wants, and it's very similar to what this other customer did 2 years ago. I think we can get it through approval easier. Using AI to spot that and be able to go back to the business and show how you and the tool are accelerating the deal, I think that's going to be the game changer for us. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the same. You just said it better, Steve. We're early stage, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's a report out. There's 50 most visited AI tools with over 24 billion visits within a 12-month period. ChatGPT being the bulk of those visits. 14, let's call it 15 billion of the 24 billion was ChatGPT. So there's 49 other tools that had some form of hit or use within that 12-month period. We're just in a state of proliferation right now. Anytime you introduce technology, it's been my experience, but anytime you introduce technology, there's a proliferation. Everyone has a different angle to attack and leverage from a revenue stream perspective. There'll be a consolidation, in my opinion, consolidation of AI tools. And you're right, Steve. We'll always get served as humans. We'll use AI to serve up information, synthesize, digest it, give us insights, give us actionable insights, give us predictive, predictions, let's say. But it will be the human that interacts with human to make the final decision as to what business course or business action that's taken, in my opinion.
Awesome, guys. Listen, I thank you. I just have one more sort of final question for both of you, and I think it's been a great chat. It's been a great talk. If you are in this profession today, whether you're on the procurement side or the sales side of contracting, and we are in the hype cycle. We're seeing all this new technology and sort of new ideas. Like, where should I focus? Where do I go to learn about this? How would you approach this if you were sort of in this job and wanted to make sure you stayed out on the forefront and sort of were still relevant in 5 years?
That is a great question. I personally don't have an answer. If I
Neither
were,
do I, by the way. That's why I asked the question, because I don't know.
I can tell you, if early in my career, if I was just entering the procurement space, I'd make sure I was double. I was going to say, let me figure out a better way of saying it. I would double down. Thank you. Double down on soft skills, persuasive, influencing, negotiation, and some level of analysis, how to interpret data. But again, to my earlier point, the mundane tactical work associated with procurement is going to be done through technology. So procurement professionals are going to find it much harder to enter the space because that's been the traditional path. You were a tactical transactional buyer and elevated yourself through the ranks. So how do you get into procurement? Don't know. But if I was in procurement early in my career, I'd make sure that I'm developing my soft skills.
It's a great idea. Absolutely. The thought that I would have, it goes back to an experience I had years ago. For 3 years, I flew around the world, honestly, as an outsourcer, frankly, letting people go. Telling people that their time at that company was
You're
no
George
longer.
Clooney.
I was George Clooney for
George
better part
Clooney,
of 3
yes.
years. And I remember there were so many people so I got to be inside the management conversation about those people. And it was interesting because what really emerged for me as a pattern was those people were not perceived as enabling change. They were perceived as resisting change. our job as in this profession is to be somewhat risk averse. I mean, that's the reality of the job. Somebody needs to be risk averse. Sales is not going to be risk averse. The business is not necessarily going to be risk averse. A lot of times we have to, but that's the job. If I was trying to make a go of this now, and I think all of us are, I think what I would really suggest to people is be seen as being on the forefront of this. There's some people that I follow on LinkedIn. Nicola Shaver is a great one. She does the legal technology hub on LinkedIn, and she just today posted some really good content about what's happening on the legal side. Now, the legal side is different from ours. It's obviously it's a much broader focus. We do contracts. It's just a part of the legal element. But I think being conversant about what thought leaders are doing and then being able to apply that to challenges in your company, that's how I think, in addition to the soft skills, being able to communicate using those soft skills and being seen as an agent of change, I think that's how you sort of make yourself, it's how you protect yourself. It's how you increase the perception of your value.
Amazing talking about this new latest and greatest technology, and it always comes back to the soft skills and emotional intelligence and sort of being aware. So gentlemen, I really want to thank you guys for this conversation. Marissa, you can throw up the contact me slide. Perfect. Thank you very much. If anybody out there wants to talk to Greg or Steve about any of this and how this impacts your profession and your industry, and highly recommend you reach out to these gentlemen. They are leaders in this field. And again, thanks guys for your time today, and good luck everybody. Go Niners.
Go Niners.
Bye
Go
all.
Niners. All right. Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks.